We're going to start our new unit, and we're going to be looking at time for the next couple of days. Now, time is an interesting concept because we talk about telling time and what time is it. But the thing about time is it's really just a guess, because the moment you say the time, it's already passed. That second hand is moving like that. Every tick it changes, which technically changes our time. So when we talk about time, we talk about estimations. It's about 3 o'clock. It's about 2 o'clock. Or it's just before 11. It's just after 10. It's between 3 and 4 o'clock. It's almost 1 o'clock. It's almost 2 o'clock. So we talk about these almost, or it's close to, because time is really just an estimate. And it's very rare that you will need an actual specific time. But we're going to practice telling and writing time to specific intervals and specific points. Now, today, we're going to be focusing on the parts of a clock and how to tell time to the nearest half hour. So, first we're going to look at the different parts of a clock. Now here, we see a clock like we have in our classroom. Now this clock has more than 3 parts, but right now we're going to talk about the 3 big parts that are needed to know. And that's the 3 things that I have circled. These 3 things are called the hands. Now, a clock has different parts, and they're all named after body parts. Right now, we're talking about the hands of a clock. And the hands of a clock point out the time. Now, there's 3 different hands. We have this long red one here. We don't normally worry about this one because that's the one that's moving like that and never really stops. And that's our second hand. We'll see it up there and it'll tell us and keep track of minutes and seconds, but we don't all normally say the time is 10:43 and 26 seconds, because by the time we say that, 2, 3, maybe 4 seconds has already gone by and we're nowhere there. Now the second one, if you notice, the hands, as the amount of time gets smaller, the hands get smaller. There's 60 seconds in a minute. There's 60 minutes in an hour and 24 hours in a day. Notice that 24 hours is smaller. So the next is our minute hand, and it's this longer black one. The minute hand's your longer hand. And it tells you how many minutes we've gone past an hour or how many minutes we are towards getting to the next hour. Now, the minute hand does not go with the big numbers. That's one thing we have to remember. And our last hand is the shorter one. It's the hour hand. Now, I like to think the hour hand does not have as far to reach to the numbers, so it's a smaller hand. Let's take a closer look at the next part of the clock in a moment. Now, the first clock we saw was an analog clock. We also have a digital clock. Now, a digital clock is a little bit different than an analog clock in the fact that it has 2 parts that are divided by a colon. That colon's a little separation mark, and on the right side of the colon, you have the minutes, and on the left side, you have the hours. So it tells you the bigger one hours first, the smaller one minutes second. So you know that 4 hours and 36 minutes have passed since either midnight or noon. Now this is a blank clock, and this part of the clock is what we call the face. The face of the clock, and the face of the clock has the numbers. Now the numbers, you'll see, go from 1 to 12. These represent our hours. There's 24 hours in a day, and we break our clock into two 24 hours. 12. Now, when we're talking about time, and we're talking about minutes, we can break our clock into half. Here's 1/2. Here's 2/2. That's why if the minute hand is pointing towards the 6, we call it half hour. So if anybody says it's 1:30, it means it's 1:30. So we've got to know that a clock can be split into two. Well, when looking at these numbers, these hours tell us there are no minutes on here. So sometimes your minute hand will be right in between an hour. If it's in between an hour, it reverts back to that first one it's already passed. Because if it hasn't passed or gotten to that 8 or that next hour, you can't say it's there. So here we have an example of a clock that tells us the hour. Remember, we're not going to worry about the second hand. Seconds are not going to be something we count on. So the first thing I would look for is the hour hand. And I'm going to look, what 2 hours is it between? And if I look, it's between the 10 and 11, which means that it is 10 o'clock. Now the next thing I'm going to look for is the minute hand. And the minute hand deals with those tiny little dots there. And if I count them all up, I know that it's pointing to my 2, but I don't say 10-2. All those little dots is actually 10. So this is 10, 10. Now the smaller the minutes, 0, 2, 4, 10, 15, 20, the closer it's going to be to the 10. The higher the minutes, 50, 55, the closer it's going to be to the 11. But it still will not get to that 11 until that minute hand is right on the 12. So now you're going to do some practice counting with the minutes. Remember, the 6 is 30 minutes. The 3 is 15. And the 9 is 45 minutes. If you can remember those minutes, it will help you moving forward. So now I want you to go do some practice in your math journal that will be turned into Canvas today.